Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to discuss the Modern Horizons pre-release that I attended. That was this past Saturday at Emerald Nights in Burbank, California. This is a pre-release kit I got, and Modern Horizons doesn't really have a theme, it's just more cards for Modern. So I wasn't really looking for anything thematically specific to the set at the pre-release. I just was hoping for some really good games and maybe a few extras that made the experience fun. In this case, we didn't really get much else from Wizards of the Coast. We just got the normal pre-release pack, but the cost of the pre-release pack is double that of the regular pre-release packs, and so it seems a little ridiculous considering what you're getting is just basically the same stuff. But this is the box, and as usual, it has a little tear out, and then it says the best things come in threes here. And when you look on the inside, there's some artwork there. A lot of this set has to do with the Eldrazi, so you get a lot of Eldrazi artwork, specifically from Battle for Zendikar era Eldrazi. And then you have some punch-out tokens here, so some more artwork on the inside here. And then we have some counters that you can use as well for the game. This is always pretty nice to have all these little extras that you might need, because it's not like they come in the packs. And so there's that. This is the internal deck box, which has the 3 Eldrazi Titans there, and the Planeswalker symbol on the back. If we open this up, as usual, you get a spin down life counter, and it's been ongoing with this like black and color motif as of now, and I like these. I think that they're much nicer looking and easier to read than the speckled color ones that we used to get, and so this is pretty cool. Inside you get 6 packs of Magic the Gathering. These are the cards that I opened from those 6 packs, as well as a special micro pack that includes a promo card. Mine was the Wheel of Potential, and it has a little promo symbol here to show you that. And then you get these 3 helper cards, which are useful for your flip cards that you'll be getting. And then you also have the code for Magic Arena, and it turns out that this is coming to Magic Arena. By the time I upload this video, it should already be on Magic Arena, and I've already redeemed this code, but you get 1 code per pre-release kit, and so you can use this once to get 6 packs on Magic Arena. So that's pretty cool. You also get the usual guide to build a pre-release deck. This is the pretty standard type of information that you would expect here, but this doesn't really take into account the presence of the double face land cards, and that might adjust the total number of lands you want to have, because if you count those cards towards your land, you're going to want more lands. But if you have those cards in your deck, you're actually going to want to have less basic lands as well. So that's something that you have to keep in mind overall. And then here we have a little bit of artwork that is, I guess, supposed to be amusing to the set. It's not really dripping with theme, although it is dripping with blood, it looks like. Then you get a card divider here, so you can separate your main deck from your sideboard or whatever it might be. Emerald Knights didn't really do a whole lot on the front end to make the experience feel a little bit more thematic, because once again, this isn't really that thematic of a set. And so I'll talk at the end about Emerald Knights' hand in this, but Wizards definitely didn't do much for this particular set besides jack up the price. And so let us take a look at all the cards that I opened. So these are all the cards that I opened in my packs, minus the standard basic lands. And as you can see, there are a lot of blue cards, but here's the deal. This set isn't like normal sets, and the presence of all of the 3-color fetch lands, the foreboding landscapes, the twisted landscapes, the deceptive landscapes, and so forth, sort of made the evaluation of the colors a little less important. And that's because you are able to splash a lot more. At least I was in my particular sealed pool. And so I, instead of evaluating everything by color, I ended up evaluating everything by what themes were being supported the most. And so there are basically 5 major themes, each attached to one of these landscapes. You know, you have the Abzan +1/+1 counters theme, you have the Temur Eldrazi theme, the Jeskai energy theme, amongst other themes. And once I resorted all of these cards to that particular format, I noticed that the Eldrazi theme had a surprising amount of consistency. So if you look at green cards in particular, you'll notice that there's not a lot of them, but the green cards all have a lot in common in that a lot of the basic Eldrazi cards are here, and some of the payoffs in uncommon are also here. So we have 3 propagator drones in uncommon, and if you look over here, it's that Herald's End. We have 2 of those, and those are Eldrazi Lords. And so even though my rares were in a lot of other colors, for example, 2 of my rares are black, but black is the shortest number of cards altogether, I was overall drawn to the idea of playing towards the themes. The Eldrazi theme appears in the Temur colors, green, red, and blue, as well as over here in colorless. And once I was able to look at that, then I saw that there was a pretty strong deck in Temur, and I just had to kind of focus on what was going to be leading that. And it also helped that I had a lot of fixing for 2 of the 3 colors in the Twisted Landscape and Foreboding Landscape. The Urza's Cave could be used for either. And then we also had a Windswept Heath and a Bloodstained Mire as 2 of my rares, but I wasn't going to be playing white or black, and so those aren't really all that interesting to me in this particular case. And so it was going to be a Temur Eldrazi deck, and as you can see, the green is sort of the base of it because there's so many synergistic cards in green. But we also have Writhing Chrysalis over here, the Void Pouncer over here, a couple of Petrifying Meddlers there. And so let's go take a look at the deck that I built. So this is the final deck list that I built. I pretty much streamlined it down to all the Eldrazi and their payoffs within the colors and tried to keep everything centered on green. And so as you can see, most of the cards are green, and it's fortunate that it works out that most of the Eldrazi, especially at the lower end, are green as well. And then we have a few additional cards here beyond just the Eldrazi. And so we have support cards that are Eldrazi related, like Nightshade Dryad can create a colorless mana or give us other colors of mana, which helps cast the blue and the red cards here. And we also have the entire suite of non-creature spells here. Nothing is specific to Eldrazi here. We just have removal spells, 3 of which are also lands. And so we have these 2 lands, and this is kind of removal spell. It's more like a trick. And then we have the 3 red removal spells as well as the blue removal spell that helps take care of different things. These are deal 3 or up to 3 with a case of the Galvanic Discharge. Gifts of the Viper is also a trick that can be used for removal as well. Utter Insignificance can take care of just about anything as necessary, and it turns off creature abilities, which is important. And then with the other creatures that we decided to put here that aren't specific to the Eldrazi, we have the Serum Visionary, which is just good value. The Molten Gatekeeper is in this deck because this deck can create a lot of Eldrazi spawns, and so the Molten Gatekeeper can take advantage of that by dealing damage to my opponent to finish them off, theoretically, with all the additional spawns that we create. We also have the Temperamental Oozewags here, and that's primarily because there is a decent amount of adapt here as well as other counter synergies, and so that will potentially give these creatures a bit of trample when necessary. And so that is that, and we just needed some bodies here. And then at the top we have the Drownyard Lurker. I don't know how often I'm going to be casting that for anything other than a cycling cost, but if we ever do get to a point where we can cast that, and we do have a minor bit of ramp here thanks to the Nightshade Dryads, it is something that we could theoretically do. But this is really more of a low curve aggro deck, and I'm looking mostly to cycle that for the Eldrazi token. So that is what that is doing. We also have a ton of fixing. We have 5 different lands that can get and fetch other lands, and we also have the Nightshade Dryad there. And so because this is kind of a low curve aggro deck, I decided that I didn't need to have more than 17 lands, even though I'm going to be using these 3 lands as spells some of the time, because oftentimes in the late game I don't want any more lands. This deck doesn't need to get past casting a 5-drop most of the time. Sometimes it will want to cast a Drownyard Lurker, but even the Dead Heralds can get us to cast it at a lower casting cost. And so for the most part I'm looking to cast up to 5 drops, and because of that I think it's safe to not add extra lands and just have these count as half lands. We had 17 lands total. Not pictured here are the 3 mountains, the 3 forests, and the 3 islands. And when you add that to these tri-lands, we will end up with all of the mana that we need. I didn't really suffer too many issues with mana over the course of the game. So I think that this build works. It's very fortunate that I was able to open so many synergistic Eldrazi, and even though there aren't any impressive rares here at all, I felt pretty good about this deck as I went into my games. So in my first match, my first opponent actually dropped before the entire tournament began, and so I ended up finding another player whose opponent dropped, and we decided to play each other instead because we were there to play Magic and not just there to win the tournament, which isn't really fun when all the prizes are the same. So my constellation match was up against an opponent who was playing a Dimir deck with a tiny splash of white, and in the first game my opponent was on the play, and I think that the game was fairly even for a bit and we were building up on the ground, and at one point I even was able to manage a wider board presence, but then my opponent played a Glasswing Grace on their big creature, and then suddenly the race was on and I wasn't able to draw removal in time for that giant flying lifelinker, and I lost pretty quickly as soon as that landed. In the second match, I took a mulligan to 6, and in this particular case, my opponent had some slower plays, playing more like one card a turn, whereas I was able to go aggro with my Eldrazi, and in going wide, plus a few tempo and removal plays that I used on my opponent's better creatures, allowed me to overwhelm my opponent before they were really able to mount any sort of good defense, and that's what got me the win in the second game. In the final game, my opponent was again on the play, and no mulligans for me this time, and it was basically the same story as the second game. While my opponent was able to have some strong plays, I had the removal ready for them, and my Eldrazi were just too numerous and too fast for my opponent to be able to stabilize against. And so I was able to get in there for the win, especially with my opponent stumbling a little bit on lands. So the interesting thing is, for the second match, I was actually matched up against the exact same player that I played the first match against. So we had a little bit of information about each other's decks, and that would change the strategy in how we'd play against each other. And so in this particular new match, I won the dice roll and I chose to go first. And things were fairly even at first, but eventually my opponent played a Crabomination, which really got them a lot of value, especially since I scryed some cards that I needed to top before they played that. And so that value play plus some other strong value plays eventually gave my opponent a much wider board and me really low on cards in hand. And so it was really obvious to me by the time that they had finished building up that I wasn't going to win this one. And so I conceded and we moved on to the next game. In the next game, my opponent had a lead from the very start, actually, because they played a Psychic Frog, and I didn't have an answer to it, and it was such a bomb. And then later, towards the end of the game, my opponent played another Glasswinged Grace, and by then there was no way for me to overcome the life disadvantage that I was already at, as well as the power disadvantage, because my opponent just played bomb after bomb after bomb, including another Crabomination. And so that game ended pretty quickly, and my opponent swept me 2-0. But this was the same opponent that I beat in the first match, 2-1. And so I feel like my opponent might have had a slight advantage over me, especially because their bombs were much stronger than my deck. In my final match, I was put up against an Azorius player, splashing a little bit of red. In the first game, I won the die roll, and I managed to just outswarm my opponent before that they were able to do much. They drew a bit too much mana and not enough action, and the low-cost Eldrazi, especially powered by the Lord, was hard for my opponent to stand up against. In the second game, we were fairly evenly matched for a while, but eventually my opponent just started drawing lands and I drew action, which meant that I had a large board of Eldrazi and my opponent was getting crushed by it. And so that ended the final match and gave me the win at 2-0 there, and that led to an overall match record of 2-1. I found the games and the deck building and everything to be a lot of fun because the power level of Modern Horizons 3 is really, really high, and a lot of fixing lets you be a lot more flexible in the types of colors that you use and the cards that you're able to fit and squeeze into your deck. And so I had a lot of fun with the sealed format in particular, even if the actual theme was a bit lacking. But if you are a fan of Magic Gathering and you've played it for a while, then the cards themselves offer a lot of callbacks to other cards that are already existing in Modern and in other formats as well, and so that was a lot of fun. For Emerald Knight's part, they gave 2 packs to everybody who played through all 3 games, and so You got 2 packs of Modern Horizons 3 there, and then they also were sponsored by Ultra Pro here, and so they were able to give out free playmats to the majority of the players that were there actually. You got to pick your playmat in order of win-loss records, and that put me in the middle of the pack. And so I picked this Brea playmat because Brea is pretty cool, and that was my experience attending the Modern Horizons pre-release at Emerald Knights. Go to Emerald Knights for giving us these extras. Let me know your experiences with the pre-release in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.